The Tale Teller. Let me tell you a story. A storytelling podcast narrated by Glenda Villamar. Episode 5. The Sorrow by Christopher Kugler. I hear her crying in the distance, and I know it's time. My wife sleeps soundly as I slip out of bed. I sneak out of the room and check on the children. They've been asleep for hours. I hesitate before closing their door, wondering if I'll ever tell them about my secret, about her. Without making a sound, I sneak out the back door and head straight into the woods. It's a dark, muggy night. It always is, but I know my way. I've been making this walk every year since I was a boy. Every summer since I first heard her, deep within the forest. The accident happened over a century ago. It was a tragedy by all accounts. I've done my research, but not much is known. Few details exist. What testimonials the survivors gave have been lost to time. What I do know is that the circus was expected in town the next day. It never arrived. But since I was a small boy, on this day of this month, when the summer is at its hottest, I hear her. I hear her crying. I weave my way through the forest and finally arrive at the railroad tracks. I follow them up the mountain. The accident happened around this time of night, while the town slept peacefully. Back then, circus trains were different than normal trains. They were longer and wider to make room for all the gear, performers, and animals. They were dangerously heavy and would foolishly speed through the night, desperate to make their destination by sunrise. Add to the fact that these mountains are some of the steepest of the Appalachian, and disaster was inevitable. The engineer had no warning. There was nothing he could have done. As the train sped through the final bend down into the valley, the cars in the rear jumped the tracks. As they began to roll down the hillside, they twisted the other cars along with them. It happened in a matter of seconds. By the time the performers, the clowns and tightrope walkers, the animal trainers and magicians knew what was happening, if they ever knew, they hardly had a chance to scream. There were few survivors. The performers, the crew, even the engineer were taken to a local cemetery where they were properly laid to rest. You can still find their tombstones, but instead of their names, there was no one to identify the bodies. You find descriptions: clown, bearded lady, lion tamer. The animals, however, they were buried on the spot, right next to the tracks, on the railroad company's land. And that's where they lay, unmarked and forgotten, until I found them. Tonight, though, as I reach the burial site, I find nothing. I never do, not at first. Nothing but empty forest. I have to close my eyes and clear my senses. I try not to think. In one deep breath, I'm aware of the eerie silence that surrounds me. In the next, I'm overwhelmed. They've arrived. The smell of fresh hay fills my nostrils. The whine of horses and chatter of monkeys cuts through the night. I can almost hear the music of a band organ and the faint laughter of children in the distance. Then I hear a menacing growl. I open my eyes and peer ahead. Like hungry wolves, they pace among the trees, back and forth, waiting to attack. But I know better. They're harmless. They're only dogs, bred to look and act wild, like a pack of wolves. They obediently wait for their trainer, not knowing he will never return. I approach them, kneeling down to say hello. Their eyes brighten and tails wag as I pet them vigorously. Then I hear a rustle in the trees above me. I look up in time to see myself surrounded by monkeys. There are big ones and little ones. Some wear diapers, while others have miniature top hats strapped around their chins. They bounce around wildly, climbing up my arms and jumping from my shoulders. I reward each with a pat on the head, which they respond to with big, teeth-filled smiles and excited cries. Satisfied, my monkey friends take me by the hand and lead me deeper into the forest, through the other animals. The woods are, inexplicably, no longer dark, as if backlit by some big tent spotlight way off in the distance. The monkeys and I approach a cluster of apple trees, where I find, as always, the former inhabitants of the reptile car. Who would have thought that, even in death, these snakes, lounging beneath an apple tree, would have a sense of humor? They hiss irritably, but slither out of my way as I walk carefully through the brush. I push through the low-hanging branches and find myself staring face to face with a monstrous black mass. The beast emerges from the darkness, and I find it to be the rhinoceros, one of many tame giants that traveled with this circus. Not far from the apple trees, the monkeys and I came across the black bears, one of my favorite groups. The older bears stand around watching their youngest cub. He energetically dances on his hind legs. He spins around and around for an audience that is not there. As the cub finishes his routine, I whistle and cheer as the monkeys jump and scream. The cub beams with pride. The monkeys and I continue on our way. We waste little time now. Even they know why I'm here. Through the trees, I catch glimpses of the other animals in the distance. The horses stand around lazily, undoubtedly enjoying their time off from pulling wagons and raising tents. The cheetahs sprint underneath the horses as they playfully chase one another. I can't help but smile as I watch the pursued give up, roll to her back, and mischievously claw at her brother, the pursuer. Beyond them, I spot the giraffes casually eating from the highest tree branches. They pause only a moment to glance in my direction, before continuing their methodical, machine-like chewing. Finally, far from the others, I find her. It is with her that I will spend the rest of the night. The monkeys scamper off, leaving us our privacy. She is, after all, the reason I come. It was her cries I heard as a small boy on a sleepless summer night that lured me out into the woods. And it was her cries still tonight that brought me out once again. She is the lone elephant in the woods tonight, and, with tear stains beneath her eyes, she is the saddest story of them all. Her guilt outweighs even herself. The accident was, in fact, her fault. The train was overloaded, and the train was going too fast. But had she not stepped toward her 2 calves, her 2 children, to reassuringly cradle them in her nose, the accident never would have happened. As the train took the final bend heading down the mountain, she and her 2 calves were just too heavy. It was their car that tipped toward the outside of the turn and inevitably jumped the tracks. I look into her eyes and I see the sadness. I see the sorrow. She begs for forgiveness, but what she doesn't understand, what she's never understood, is that I'm not the one to forgive her. What she can't possibly comprehend is that her 2 babies, despite being the cause of it all, were the only 2 animals to survive. But no matter how many times I try to explain it to her, I know it's futile. In her mind, they are the ones missing. In her mind, they are the ones dead. And that's why she cries. Her calves survived, and they had each other. She died, and has nobody, except me. And that is why I come. On the one day, tonight, that they return to existence, I come, so she is not alone. So she has somebody. While the dogs keep an eye out, while the monkeys swing from the trees, while the giraffes chew on the branches, while the black bears put on their shows, I'm here with her. I hear an approaching train on the hillside. I know we don't have much time. I glance back at the other animals as the train rounds the bend. As the light of the engine shines on them, the animals disappear, group by group. The dogs are the first to go. They let out a desperate howl, perhaps their goodbye, then silence. The reptiles are gone in an instant. The bear cub stops spinning to glance at the train, then vanishes. The giraffes, the monkeys, all gone. I turn toward her and caress beneath her ears. We share one last look. Her eyes offer one last apology, to which I reply, "It's okay." But then she's gone. Gone for another year. Gone until I hear her cry again. Christopher Kugler lives in central Pennsylvania with his wife and 2 dogs. He's worked in broadcast television and enjoys writing novels. He loves hearing from readers, so send him an email at christopherkugler@gmail.com or find him on Twitter at cklockwork. You can also find out more about Christopher by visiting his website, christopherkugler.com. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with a new tale to tell.